So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Become Prince of Uzumaki Clan. So let's start the series. A small 5-year-old raced down the streets of Konoha. Blood trailed down his arms, to land of the floor. His clothes were torn in various places, and hair matted with both fresh and old blood. Tear marks stained his cheeks and eyes red and puffy. Behind him a mob of 10 to 15 people were chasing after the single child, curses leaving their mouth. A strangled cry left the blonde's mouth as he was knocked to the ground by a fist. Crying, the blonde pleaded for them to leave him alone. But the only answer the boy received were cruel laughter as they continued to beat him. 2 figures ran over. A man with bright blonde hair and blue eyes. Beside him was a beautiful woman with tomato red hair and sparkling blue eyes that shone with tears. She fell beside the blonde boy and cried out for the crowd to stop as heartbreaking sobs escaped her lips. Her cries and pleads for the mob to leave her son alone went unheard as they continued to beat the helpless child. Minato glared hatefully at the group, yelling at them, cursing. Anything but everything went unheard. Tears gathered in his eyes as he dropped to his knees beside his wife and cried for the pain his only son was experiencing. Do something, Minato, Kushina sobbed as she tried to wrap her arms around her son, to shield him. Why are they doing this to him? Naruto's cries of pain were echoed by his parents, as they could do nothing but watch him suffer. Please stop. Kushina buried her face into her son's neck. Minato closed his eyes and wrapped his arms around his wife. He prayed to every god he could think of to help Naruto. He knew that without a physical body there was nothing he or Kushina could do for their beloved son. Hey, what's going on here? A crow-masked ANBU growled out as he leaped over the gathered mob to land in front of them. He glanced from the group to the boy lying in a pool of his own blood. A snarl formed on his lips that went unnoticed due to the mask he wore. As he turned and glared at the group, black eyes shifted to red, black tomos spun wildly. You'll pay for hurting Naruto-kun. Minato and Kushina looked at the ANBU who was defending their son. Turning towards her son, Kushina ran her fingers through his hair. Naruto, you're going to be alright, she cried. Crow-san, we'll protect you now. Crow turned after dispatching the last of the mob and hurried towards the small blonde boy. Naruto-kun? Crow whispered as he caressed the boy's face. You'll be fine, Naruto-kun. I'll get you to Rinchan. She'll heal you, he whispered, carefully picking the severely injured boy into his arms and took off. He'll tell the Hokage about the dead civilians after he was sure Naruto was alright. Minato and Kushina followed, eyes trained on their son. Who do you think he is, Minato? She whispered. He looks young, only a few years older than Naruto if I had to guess. Minato nodded his head, and Uchiha, he had the Sharingan. I think he might be Itachi-kun. He was a talented child, a pacifist at heart much like his cousin Obito, and his about the same age. Crow raced into the ANBU headquarters heading towards the medical ward. On the way he passed several other shinobis all unmasked and lounging around, until they saw Crow running in with their favorite blonde. Naruto! Came various cries. A gray-haired male bolted up and ran towards Crow. What happened, Crow? Crow glanced at Kakashi. A mob attack. Can someone alert the Hokage and tell him there are about 15 dead civilians near Haruka's clothing store? Ginma nodded his head as he and Hade vanished to go and tell the Hokage as Crow, with Kakashi and Shusha raced towards the medical wing. Is Rin there? Yeah, she left a while before you came in. She said something about paperwork. Kakashi answered as he eyed the blonde boy. Is that all his blood? He whispered, fear gripping his chest. Crow's arms tightened before relaxing and he nodded his head. Yes. When I happened upon them, Naruto-kun had already been knocked out and lying in a pool of his own blood, yet they continued to beat him. Kakashi gritted his teeth from behind his mask. This has to stop. The villagers and the few shinobis who harbors hatred for Naruto, due to the Kyuubi needs to see the truth. That Naruto is a 5-year-old boy and not a 1,000-year-old fox demon. And they will learn, even if it costs them their lives. They can't keep punishing Naruto for something that wasn't even his fault. Shursui and Itachi nodded their heads and as they reached Rin's office, Kakashi entered while Itachi and Shursui headed towards one of the medical rooms. Rin, Kakashi called out, gaining his teammates' attention. Naruto needs help. Itachi rescued him from another mob attack. This one is worse than any of his previous ones. What? Rin yelled out, furious. Leaping from her chair she ran towards the nearest room, Kakashi behind her. Entering it, the young healer nearly burst into tears at the sight of the boy she considers a little brother. Seeing as the blonde's father had been her sensei, she knew Kakashi felt the same way. The team had been like a family, and she was heartbroken with the death of Obito, then both her sensei and his wife a few years later. She couldn't lose Naruto as well. She didn't think she could handle it. If the boy died, and she knew Kakashi, Itachi and Shursui would be just as deeply affected as she. Hell, everyone as the Anbu would. After all, they were the ones who took care of him whenever he was sick, lonely or hurt due to one of his beatings. And if they could, they would have adopted him a long time ago. But all of them were blocked and denied by both the civilian council and the elders. Rin approached the bed. Her hands glowing green, she did a full body scan as she healed the boy. 2 fractured ribs on either side, severe internal damage. One of his ribs had been very close to piercing his lungs. One more kick to that area would have done just that. His right shoulder is dislocated and his wrist sprained. His left leg is broken, as is his right arm. Gashes on his chest and back, bruises. His head seemed to have severe trauma as well. She whispered towards her companions, "They did some serious damage this time, and I'm scared to find out how much they affected him mentally." Kushina sobbed into Minato's chest as she listened to Rin recite all the damage that had been inflicted upon Naruto. The Yondaime Hokage closed his eyes and gripped his wife, tears falling from his eyes. The group of ANBUs had gathered and was sitting out in the hall, listening in horror at every cry of pain and screams that tore itself from the boy's throat, even in his unconscious state. Yugao hugged Hate, hiding her face within her lover's chest. Anko had her head buried in her lap while her shoulders shook. Rado patted the girl's shoulder as he closed his eyes, trying to block out the cries from the operating room, as was the deal with the rest of them. They hated the fact that Naruto had to suffer so much because the people in the village were blind fools. Rin shook her head, trying to stop the tears. It wouldn't do for her to burst into hysterics while she was trying to save her little brother's life, would it? Grasping the boy's shoulder tightly, she yanked it back into place, causing a cry of pain to escape the blonde as tears fell from his closed eyes. "I'm sorry, Naruchan. You're almost finished," she whispered, soothing the blonde as she wrapped the boy's shoulder tightly in bandages while casting both his right arm and his left leg and wrapping his right wrist. Walking towards the sink area, Rin grabbed a bowl filled with warm water along with a rag and headed towards the bed and started cleaning the blood, dirt and grim off of the small boy. "Minato-sensei, Kushina-chan, I know you must be hurting a lot seeing your son suffering so much, and if you are watching us, you should also be aware that we are trying our best to protect him. But," Rin bit her bottom lip as tears gathered in her eyes, "everything seems so useless. Naruto does not deserve this. I wish I could just take him away, so far away from here, away from the unfounded hate and the beatings that are being directed at him." Shaking her head, Rin stood up with a sigh and walked towards the sink and disposed of the bloody, dirty water and tossed the rag into the trash. Before leaving the room, Rin placed a kiss upon the sleeping boy's forehead and left to tell the rest of the group what was going on. As she left, Kushina headed towards the bed and sat beside her baby and held his hand tightly, tears gathering in her eyes as she felt Minato wrap themselves around her. The former Hokage closed his eyes. He had never asked anyone for anything, especially not the gods. They hadn't been much help to him growing up. He remembered praying a lot back then, but it seemed no matter how much he prayed, the gods just refused to listen to him. So he stopped asking for their help. But for Naruto, he tried to ask the gods one last time for help for himself, help for his wife, and help for his son who needed him the most. Minato gripped his wife tightly before releasing her. It would seem the lovely redhead had cried herself to sleep. Turning dark blue eyes glanced at the bed, reaching out. The ex-Hokage ran his hand through his son's blonde hair and caressed his face lightly. "I'm so sorry, Naruto. It's my fault that you have to suffer so much. I should have never burdened you with this responsibility. But I had no other choice. Your mother had been the Kyuubi Jinchuriki before you, and before her was another Uzumaki. But they never went through any of this. I don't know why they are treating you so badly, Naruto." Tears gathered in Minato's eyes. "If I could, I would trade places with you. I'd shield you from all of this hate and abuse." If only. Minato fell onto the bed and cried. Hokage-sama Crow turned to look at his leader, pale hands clenched into fists. "This can't continue. He is not safe here, and there is only so much that we can do. We've been lucky thus far that someone has always been there when mobs or a drunken person started beating Naruto-kun. But today, it was cut very close. Had I not just returned from a mission, no one would have known about the attack, and Naruto-kun very well could have died even with the Kyuubi's healing, and there is only so much that Fox can do. Itachi is right, Sandaime-sama. Shursui spoke out, eyes never leaving the room where Naruto lay. Today's attack could have been worse. It's time that the boy takes his heritage. There will be no way the villagers will harm the last Namikaze. Besides, didn't Kushinaheim's younger brother contact you about his nephew's whereabouts? Cold black eyes turned and stared at his leader. What if you had him and a team of Whirlpool shinobis here to help protect Naruto? Especially since we can't always be with him due to missions though. I suppose Itachi, Kakashi, Rin and I could always stay with Naruto-chan at the mansion. Kakashi and Rin nodded their heads. Kakashi and I know the Namikaze estate like the back of our hand, Sandaime-sama. And who better to look after Naruto but the people who had known both his parents, and the boy's future spouse and family member. Itachi turned and glared at the female. Silence yourself, Rin. I'll have you know the heir of the Uchiha clan started only to be cut off by an amused-looking Hatake. Kakashi smirked and turned to look at the younger male. Don't deny it, Itachi. Everyone knows that you care about Naruto greatly, and in a different way than the rest of us. Shursui grinned and patted his younger cousin's shoulder. Yes, Ida-chan, don't deny the truth, just embrace it, though you do know nothing serious can happen until Naruto-chan is at least 15. Itachi glared. I'm not a pedophile nor a pervert, so get your head out of the clouds and back down to earth where it belongs. Or when I become head of the Uchiha clan, I'll ban those perverted books that you love so dearly from the compound, and when everyone asks why, I'll tell them, it was all your fault. Shursui's eyes widened. You can't do that, he protested, especially not Jiraiya's yaoi edition of Ika Ika. You know, he had been inspired by you and Naruto-chan. Rin, Anko and Yugao, being the only females present, turned and glared at Shursui for his comment. What do you mean by that, Shursui? Naruto is 5 years old. Jiraiya may be a super pervert, but even he has a limit. Rin trailed off and turned to look at the Hokage. Doesn't he? Jiraiya wouldn't dare to write a fantasy book on a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, would he? The Sandaime's sweat dropped. Knowing Jiraiya, I wouldn't put it past him. He is a super pervert after all. But Yugao brow twitched. His 5 years old and Itachi is only 10. That damn pervert should learn where the limits are. It's bad enough that he uses adult women. Now he's even using little kids. What a pig! Itachi frowned and glared at Shursui. How do you even know that, Shursui? Shursui smiled and pulled out a book from his holster and raised it. On the cover of the book was a long dark-haired male whose back was the only thing visible. His arm was raised and pressed against a tree, trapping a short blonde figure. As he leaned forward, he wrote a small dedication inside. Grinning, the laid-back Uchiha Anbu flipped the book open and turned to a specific page and held it up again. Itachi narrowed his eyes and read the words, "This book is dedicated to my beloved and most adorable godson Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto and his future lover Uchiha Itachi. I had been greatly inspired to create this after watching these two boys interact, and if you enjoy this first edition, wait for more in the future, as I plan to make a part 2 when my godson and his lover reach the right age to do other things." Anko produced a kunai and twirled it around her finger. When that pervert returns, he's going to wish he hadn't. How dare he uses my favorite brat as a basis for his perverted fantasy? The snake mistress hissed. Yugao and Rin nodded their heads in agreement. Itachi glared at the book. All the more reason for me to ban them. He ignored his cousin's useless pleading and whining. All right, Rin called, standing. We should leave. But someone should stay the night with Naruto-chan, she called, turning and smiling at the Uchiha heir. Thanks for volunteering, Itachi. With that said, the rest of the group left while telling the crow to watch over their precious brother, and to not take advantage over him. Rolling his eyes, Itachi stood up and walked towards the door and opened it. He stood there silently and just watched the blonde on the bed. Walking towards the bed, Itachi took a seat on the opposite side of where Kushina and Minato sat. Both of the Aparitions stared at the young boy as he watched their son. Minato-sama, Kushina-sama, he spoke gently, black eyes shifting into red, his tomos spinning wildly. We are trying really hard to protect him, but it's getting harder with every year. I fear for him, and I see what no one else can. I see how tired he is, how scared he is, and no one, especially not a child as young as Naruto, should ever feel like this. And I wish that he could see you so he knows how much you both love him. Itachi looked up into two startled pair of eyes. He thinks the both of you hated him, that you abandoned him because he's a monster. It took everyone in ANBU to reassure him that the both of you loved him more than anything and you wanted to be here for him. You can see us? Kushina whispered. Itachi nodded. I saw you when I first arrived and rescued Naruto. I didn't say anything then because I didn't want to draw attention to myself, which is also the reason I ran to the base instead of teleporting. Minato nodded his head. Is it because of the Sharingan? No, I don't believe so. I have always been more spiritually aware than anyone in the clan. Hokage-sama, Shursui, Kakashi and the others could as well if they tried. Itachi placed a hand over Naruto's and Naruto. He will be able to with the proper training. He's told me several times that he thought he felt someone hugging and comforting him even though no one was there. Itachi looked over at the yondaime. The first time he told me was a few months ago. Naruto had been crying from the villagers' crude words in the middle of the village, he said. He felt someone in front of him, holding him. I believed it was you, Yondaime-sama. Minato nodded his head. He remembered that day. He was so upset as he watched the villagers' treatment of his son, and how they ignored him, even as he stood there crying. He had kneeled before his son and wrapped his arms over his shoulder. Yeah, I wish the villagers would just leave Naruto in peace. Kushina opened her eyes and stared at her baby. What if Nanjiro were to come to Konoha? My brother would protect Naruto, or have him go to Uzumaki with Itachi and the others. Itachi nodded his head. We were actually planning on sending word for your brother to come to Konoha with a group of Yuzu shinobis to help us protect Naruto better. Kushina leaned forward to kiss her son's forehead. Have a good sleep, my little prince, for soon your uncle and your people will be here to help protect you as well. Minato smiled and looked over at Itachi. I want to thank you, Itachi, he called out, gaining the said Uchiha's attention, for helping Naruto and defending him as fiercely as you do. Itachi nodded his head. Naruto is precious to me. To us at ANBU HQ, we'd move heaven and earth if it could protect him. Blue eyes turned and watched as the red of the Sharingan faded to reveal pitch-black pools of the abyss and smiled at the Uchiha heir. He knew that this boy, he would be something great. He could just feel it. Uzumaki Nanjiro didn't know what to think when he got the missive from Konoha, but upon reading the contents of the letter he was more than upset. Turning, he stormed out of his room and headed towards his parents. Arriving at the throne room, Nanjiro opened the door and bowed slightly to his parents in greeting. Father, mother, a letter from Konoha was just delivered to me by one their hawks. Oh, and what did it say? Questioned the Queen of Whirlpool, curious. Nanjiro clenched his fist. Kushina's son survived. What? A screech rang out and everyone turned towards the queen in astonishment, surprised that such a sound came from the woman, but given the circumstance, they couldn't really blame her for the reaction she gave. But the Council of Konoha told us he was killed during the sealing, that the potent chakra of Kyuubi was just as strong and deadly for an infant to handle. The king placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, a glare set on his face. He couldn't believe he was hearing something like this. He didn't think Hiruzen was the type to do something like this, hiding a child from his family, and not just any child, a prince, and a future tutor to an allied country. Something like this was more than enough to start a war, and war had been declared for far less. Nanjiro explained this. Konoha has one chance to redeem itself before I retaliate against them for this betrayal. Kuranosuke raged, an angry red tint coloring his cheeks, a testimony to how upset he was by this information. Uzumaki and Konohagakure has always been allies, ever since the marriage of Hashirama Senju and Mito Uzumaki. We did everything we could to help Konoha flourish, and this is how they repay us for our kindness. Nanjiro nodded his head. He understood where his father was coming from and he agreed. For 5 years, the existence of his nephew was kept from them. He had missed 5 years of his nephew's life and his parents, their only grandson. It was 5 years that they would never get back, and how could they tell a kid, an orphan by the sound of it, that he had a family, but they never did anything to help him? It could be a disaster. Holding up the letter in his hand, the Konoha emblem catching their attention with a swirl crest in the corner. The Council of Konoha lied and deceived us into believing that Uzumaki Naruto was killed during the sealing. In this letter, the Hokage has spoken of Kushina and how she married Minato, the yondaime, about her being pregnant, and the attack of Kyuubi. Frowning, Nanjiro lowered his eyes to the ground in front of him. I don't think he has any idea that we already knew about my sister and her husband and that they had been expecting a child. The letter stated that he wanted me and a few of our shinobis to come to Konoha to watch over Naruto, to keep him safe. Safe, from what exactly, Nanjiro? Kuranosuke asked with a frown, eyes narrowed. He didn't like the sound of this. First, Konoha had hidden the fact that Whirlpool had a new prince, and now it seemed like his grandson was in some kind of danger. What the hell was his old friend doing? Glancing towards the side so he wasn't looking at his parents, Nanjiro frowned. Most people are aware that the Uzumaki clan are geniuses when it comes to the sealing arts, as Uzumaki Mito-san proved when she volunteered to be the first holder of the Kyuubi, and was able to subdue him, and then later Kushina. Nanjiro paused briefly as he furrowed his brows. 5 years ago, the 10th of October, Kushina went into labor. Thus the seal holding the demon back weakened, and somehow the Kyuubi was able to escape his prison, rampaging just outside of Konoha, forcing the 4th Hokage to sacrifice his life, sealing the Kyuubi into his son, Kushina's son, ending the terror that the Kyuubi had brought upon the people. Looking towards his parents, he continued, "But this is only a guess, make no mistake though. I do plan to find out how the Kyuubi broke free and why the council lied to us about Naruto dying." Kuranosuke nodded his head and turned to look out the window beside him. From his position he could see his people walking the streets, children running around while their parents watched over them while smiling. Uzumaki was a peaceful place with hardly any fights or discrimination. His people were both compassionate and intelligent and knew when and who to offer second chances to, especially when the invitation was given to Nuknins. He watched as a little boy about 5 or 6 tripped over a rock and skinned his knees and elbow. But that wasn't what he was staring at. No, the boy was different, and in any other village would have been picked on or ostracized for his appearance. What with skin the color of limes with fish-like gills on each side of his neck and markings under his eyes, it was obvious the kid was different, and people didn't like things that were strange or abnormal. They feared it, and when mortals fear something they always seek to destroy that thing. It was written deep within a person's survival instinct. A group of older kids came running over towards the crying boy and helped him up. One of the girls in the group had just smiled and picked the boy up while one of the males grinned and ruffled the younger one's hair, causing the boy to laugh. Kuranosuke smiled at the sight. It was moments like this, and people like them that made him happy to be king of Uzumaki, and he was proud of the type of people that lived here. People who could see past a person's physical appearance and befriend them. His thoughts turned towards his grandson, the third container for the Kyuubi, a Jinchuriki. With a sigh he faced his son. Jinchurikis aren't treated well in other villages. Uzumaki is perhaps the only village in the elemental continents that would be able to tell the difference between a scroll and the object in which it holds. It upsets me just thinking about the treatment my poor grandson was made to suffer because of the stupidity of mankind. We need to take him from Konoha. Bring him here. Uzumaki will treat him as he should be treated. He will grow up loved and appreciated for the burden that he carries. Samaya urged, standing up from her throne. Nanjiro rose his arm. Calm yourself, mother. I will take a handful of Uzushinobis and samurais to Konoha with me to stay with Naruto. He will be cared for. I promise you this. No harm shall befall him while I'm there. Samaya nodded her head and sat back down. I want pictures of him, Nanjiro. I want to see what he looks like. Would he look just like his mother, my beautiful Kushina, or her handsome husband, blonde hair, red hair, or a mix of colors, a dark shade of blue like Kuhina or a bright color like Minato? She trailed off, a dreamy expression entering her eyes as she thought about her grandson. Nanjiro smiled lightly at his mother before facing his father, wondering what he would say on the matter. He wanted to give Konoha a chance only because his sister loved that village. It was her second home after all. But he would do what was right for his nephew, and if taking him from that village was needed, he'd do it, regardless if the action could rise a war. Konoha brought it upon themselves for hiding Naruto from them. And your wishes, father? Send weekly or monthly reports on Naruto and his treated in Konoha. I want to know his likes, dislikes, dreams and goals for the future, his personality, friends, who his caretaker is and where he lives. I want to know how he is both physically and psychologically. And why Hiruzen never told us about Naruto until now. Nanjiro nodded his head. I will gather and notify you on who I am taking with me, and we will depart in 3 days. That's fine. Kuranosuke nodded and waved his hand, dismissing his son, who bowed slightly and left the room. Before we start, I have to point out a major fact. I never said this was an Iten-era FIC. The first chapter was Shursui and Kakashi. They were just teasing Itachi, and with Jiraiya, he's a pervert. I could totally see him doing something like that. Though I do love Iten-era fics, I'm not even sure this one will have a pairing, and if it does, it will be minor like the rest of my fics. And besides, pairings aren't the main focus in any of my stories. And to those who have a problem with yaoi shouldn't read any of my fics because even though pairings aren't a major factor, mentions and hints are there, and if you don't like it, I don't really care. You ask why people are obsessive about yaoi. It's because unlike you we aren't narrow-minded, stuck in the past. Idiotic fools like you and everyone who thinks homosexuality is disgusting needs to grow the hell up. Love comes in all shapes, sizes, races and genders, and if you don't like or approve it's not my problem. Don't come crying to me about it. My pen name clearly states that I'm a yaoi fangirl, more so on Itaneru, but still. Anyways, here is the next chapter, enjoy. Chapter 3. Kanahagakura. A few days later, Hokage's office. Naruto lay huddled beneath a blanket in the corner of the office. Itachi and Shursui sat on either side of the boy while Kakashi and Irika sat across from them. Naruto? Irika whispered, are you alright? It's been a few days since the boy left ANBU HQ's medic wing, and since then the other ANBUs and the high-ranking Jounins were on alert for any attack or plans for an attack on the blonde, and if found guilty, they were immediately taken to ANBU's torture interrogation department where Biki and Anko would have their fun. The blonde nodded his head, blue eyes focused on a spot behind Kakashi and Irika, confusing everyone but Itachi, who, despite being surprised, hid it well. I think so, he whispered. Blinking, he turned his head towards the third, who was busy with his mountainous pile of paperwork. Did the yondaime have a pretty wife? His question caught everyone off guard. No one had expected such a random question, and they all stared at the blonde boy, wondering where or why he was asking something like that. It wasn't really common knowledge that Konoha's Kiroi Senko had a love release of all, a wife, or a child at that. From their spots behind Kakashi and Irika, Kushina and Minato looked shocked at the question but happy at the same time as they moved closer towards their son. Hope filled them at the thought of being able to interact with Naruto. What's with that question, Naruto? The sandaime asked. Naruto turned and looked at the two forms walking towards him. I was just wondering if the yondaime was married to a beautiful woman with pretty red hair, he whispered. The woman gasped. Tears filled her eyes at her son's statement. No one beside her family and Minato had told her they loved the color of her hair, and to hear her son, a boy who didn't even know her, claim that her red hair was beautiful, the same hair color she hated when she was younger because she got teased and called tomato head. Naruto, my little maelstrom, Kushina bit her bottom lip as she dropped to her knees before him. You can see us, can't you? She whispered. Everyone watched as the blonde boy nodded his head in confusion. What are you nodding at, Naruto? Irika blinked and went to walk towards the boy but was stopped by Kakashi, who shook his head, telling his lover to wait and see what will happen. Naruto blinked and turned towards Irika before glancing towards the two apparitions standing, kneeling, before him. The pretty lady had buried her head into his side. Soft sobs escaped her, and he could hear her muttering, sorry, we're sorry, and please forgive us every now and then, while the yondaime had placed an arm around the woman and another on his leg. It felt sort of nice, like they were his parents, and were trying to comfort him. Please don't cry, he whispered, raising a hand to oat the woman's red hair. You're too pretty to be crying. Blue eyes turned and glacéed at the yondaime, who looked utterly devastated, and Naruto didn't know why. Everyone stared in confusion as the blonde whispered something before he started patting the air. They were worried that this last attack had caused something to happen to the boy. Itachi glanced at the sight of Naruto with his parents, and it brought a small smile to his lips. He knew just by watching them that half of them would have made great parents. It is a shame they never had that chance. Itachi, though, a frown breaking through the smile. Sometimes life was cruel that way. Naruto can see things. What are you talking about, Itachi? Shursui called, confused. Itachi sighed. That question he asked about the yondaime having a beautiful wife with red hair, the reason he asked was because he can see them. He motioned towards Kakashi and Irika. They were standing behind Kakashi and Irika, which explained the reason behind Naruto staring in that direction. I figured he was just staring at a random spot, so I didn't think anything about it until he voiced that question. Wait. Are you saying he can see ghosts, the ghost of Minato-sensei and his wife? Kakashi burst out before he paused and eyed the Uchiha heir with narrowed eyes. You've seen them as well? Yes, on both counts, Kakashi, and before you ask, if I said something like that, you'd probably have me locked up in a mental ward for seeing things that weren't there, at least with Naruto. You can't deny anything, for he wouldn't know who or how Kushina is or looks like. Shursui nodded. He has a point, before a smile formed on his lips as glanced at his younger cousin. But locking you up in a mental ward, your father would never allow that, he'd never live it down. If it was made public that his eldest son and heir had suddenly gone crazy and was seeing ghosts, a snicker was issued but was stopped just as fast by a slap to his head. Anyways, what are we going to do about this? Iruka motioned towards Naruto, who looked like he was leaning into something as his hair was smoothed back as if Samian was running invisible fingers through his hair. What's going on? Itachi glanced over at Iruka before turning towards Naruto and his parents. Minato-sama is holding Naruto in his arms while telling Naruto how sorry he is for what the villagers were doing, and Kushina-sama is playing with Naruto's hair, he responded, being the only other person who can see ghosts. Iruka nodded his head while Kakashi smiled. Sensei can finally be the father he always wanted to be. That's great. I wish I could see them. You're lucky you can see them, Itachi. A pout would have been witnessed had the mask been off. Itachi slanted a look towards the infamous copycat shinobi. If you were to hone your body to be able to use spiritual and physical energy separately instead of mixing them, you will be able to see them as well, Itachi pointed out. Separately? Kakashi questioned. Itachi nodded his head. The spiritual energy is what enables me to see Minato-sama and Kushina-sama. He took a glance at the blondes and the red-headed woman before facing Kakashi again. I've always been able to use both the physical and spiritual energy separately, which is most likely the reason I'm better in controlling my chakra than most people. Thus I have an easier time utilizing it to create any jutsus, he stated blankly. I know people assume the Sharingan is what caused me to be so powerful, but it's not true. I have never used my Kiki Genkai outside of spars or missions, and I've never copied an ally's move without seeking their approval and guidance in mastering their techniques to the best of my abilities. It's true, I've never seen Itachi using the Sharingan when he wasn't in a fight, Shursui agreed with a nod. So that's where your genuines come from, You learn to use both of your energies separately before molding them for chakra usage, and by that point you already had a good grasp on how to mold the energy into one, right? Itachi hummed. It took me years to actually get RORHE point where I could mold the energy, and when father had discovered I could use my chakra, he had me enrolled into the academy. Information came easy, as did target practice, like it does for most Uchihas. And when it came to performing the academy jutsu, the teachers were surprised a 6-year-old could actually grasp the concept of molding the energy, and even more so by doing the academy jutsus flawlessly. And it gave you an instant graduation, Shursui sighed. Not even in the academy for a year, and you had already became a genin. Itachi shook his head while Kakashi grinned from behind his mask. Yeah, you shocked everyone, and I believe Fugaku was so proud that day he couldn't stop smiling. The shinobi and civilians he didn't kill from a heart attack, he HD scarred to death. Nothing, Sarutobi stated. This is to remain an S-rank secret until someone else is discovered who can see spirits as well. Picking up a letter, he held it up. For now we have more important things to deal with. Kakashi turned towards his leader. Like what? Kuranosuke-sama sent a missive. Nanjiroji-sama is on his way to Konoha with a handful on shinobis and samurais. They should be here. The Hokage was cut off by the doors opening. Hokage-sama, an entourage of shinobis and samurai bearing the mark of Uzumaki are heading this way. They should be here in 20 minutes. Kushina looked up at that, a small smile on her lips as she turned towards Minato. He's here. Naruto will be safe now, she whispered. Minato smiled and gave his wife a one-armed hug. Yeah? Looking up, the Hokage sighed. Now, this could be trouble, murmured Kakashi as he rose. We should go and meet them at the gates. The Hokage nodded his head. Itachi, you stay with Naruto. We'll be back with Uzumaki prince and his entourage shortly. As soon as the Hokage and his entourage made it to the gates where two Chunin stood, the Uzumaki shinobis and samurai were already there. A young man with shoulder-length fiery red hair and light blue eyes stood in front of the group, dressed in a pair of dark blue hakama and a light blue haori with silver swirl-like patterns. Around his waist was a dark blue obi, and around his arm was his forehead protector. The Hokage walked over and nodded. Prince Nanjiru, I take it? Getting a short nod and a bow from the mentioned prince, Sarutobi continued, your father mentioned you were coming. I didn't think it would be so soon though. Yes, well, I am most anxious to meet with my nephew, you can imagine. Nanjiru narrowed his eyes. Before we start anything, I would like to meet my nephew, introduce myself and the people who will be protecting him. Glancing around the village, the first prince of Uzumaki withheld the building urge to scowl at the looks of awe and admiration being thrown his way. I will also start training Naruto sometime next week. You can never start too early, and he's at the right age to begin learning the Uzumaki Kenjutsu style. The Sandaime blinked. Isn't that a little too advanced for Naruto-kun to learn right now? I've seen Kushina-chan and Minato-kun practicing a lot before her pregnancy, and if I understand correctly, isn't the Uzumaki style based more on godlike speed and precision than anything? The only person who could match her speed was Minato. Nanjira grinned. That's right, and no, it's not too advanced for Naruto. Like I stated, he's at the right age. He can start improving on his speed now, as well as having him do katas, and in 3 years he can begin learning how to use a katana. By the time he graduates from the academy, he should be about high chunin to low jounin. Sarutobi, Kakashi, Shursui and Irika looked surprised by that. Really? Nodding, the Prince of Yuzuno Kuni stared at the approaching tower. Of course, the Uzumaki were as natural in Kenjutsu as we were in the sealing arts. Naruto will be the strongest of us all. After all, both of his parents were great. The gathered Konoha shinobis couldn't help but agree with that statement. The boy would be a force that no one would want to mess with, especially if he inherited his parents' intelligence and tenacity. We would want to help as well, Shursui stated. My cousin, Itachi, won't take no for an answer, and it doesn't matter if you're a prince or not. Itachi is hell-bent on protecting Naruto, and not even Kami will stop him. Is that so? Nanjira turned and narrowed his eyes. I suppose you can join in training him. I won't deny you that. After all, you've been there for him a long time, and if this Itachi is as protective as you claim, then I know he'll do everything in his power to make sure Naruto gets strong so he can protect himself. The Sandaime nodded his head. Of course, as soon as we reach my office, you will be able to meet Naruto-kun, turning the aged Hokage-eyed Kakashi and Shursui. Can the both of you get the council members and tell them we are going to be holding a meeting and that they all better be present within the hour, or I'll take their refusal to comply as an act of treason, and they will be meeting with Ibiki for a whole week. Kakashi and Shursui nodded. As you order, Hokage-sama. With that said, they vanished in a swirl of leaves. Well, let's get back to the office. Naruto-kun is already there along with one of his closest friends. Sarutobi glanced towards Kushina's younger brother, briefly before looking over at Irika. I will also tell you the reason I sent the letter to you now. Nanjira gave a nod as he motioned for his people to follow him. I see, that will be fine, then. Slanting a look towards the Hokage, he narrowed his eyes. My mother, Queen Sumire, wishes to have pictures of her grandson, and my father, King Kuranosuke, wants me to send him all the information I can get on Naruto. It will be a great help if you can assist me with this. He's sorely disappointed in Konoha and how it would betray an allied country by deceiving us and lying about it. I know not what you are talking about, Nanjira-sama. The Sandaime furrowed his brows. I've never lied to you about anything, nor had we contacted Yuzushiogakure since the Kyubi attack, and the reason will be made known when we get to the meeting room. Nanjira nodded his head and waited patiently as the aged leader guided them towards the tower, up the stairs, past the secretaries and into a room with fire shadow printed across the door. Here we are. Sarutobi smiled as he pushed open the door and entered the room, causing the two on the couch to turn and face the entrance. Naruto, my boy, there is someone I want you to meet. Naruto and Itachi turned and glanced at the man who just entered the office. He was tall, about 6 feet 2 inches, with broad shoulders. His shoulder-length hair was a dark red and his eyes were the color of the sky on a clear day, and he was tanned. Who is he? That's your uncle, Naruto. His name is Uzumaki Nanjira and he's my younger brother. He has come to help keep you safe. Kushina ran her fingers through the blonde hair. He'll protect you like Itachi and the others? Nanjira took several steps forward before stopping as he took in the sight of the small boy with blonde hair and blue eyes. He looked just like his father, a miniature clone of the Yellow Flash. But he could see a bit of his sister in the boy as well. The shape of his eyes and the feminine curve of his face, and he had a feeling that this kid was going to be a real looker when he got older. Hello, Naruto. Naruto gave a small nod of his head and waved. Are you my uncle Sarutobi-ji-chan told me about? He asked. Nanji-chan? Nanjira looked surprised by that before he grinned happily. He was never addressed like that way, not even by his eldest sister's son when she was alive, that is. He shook his head. He couldn't think about that. His sister Anissa and her family have been gone for a long time now, so there was no sense in thinking about it now. It was a sad fact, though. Nagato would have been about the same age as himself if he was Ave. Smiling, Nanjira ruffled the blonde's hair. You're very smart, Naruto. And yes, I am indeed your uncle. How are you? I'm fine, thank you for asking. And yourself? Blinking back his shock, Nanjiru glanced towards the Hokage briefly before sighing. His nephew's mannerisms were not those of a 5-year-old, and it bothered him. A child shouldn't have to act like he was in his 30s. Hell, not even he used the manners and etiquette pounded into his head since he was old enough to walk, and he knew for a fact his older sister was never one for being proper. She was always the first to jump into mud puddles or pick fights, then be all prim and proper. She'd scoffed, scowled, and threatened anyone if they told her she had to act like a lady. "I'm good," Nanjiru replied, walking over and kneeling in front the couch so he could look at the boy closer. "As you already know, I'm your uncle. Name's Uzumaki Nanjiru. I'm here to help watch you." Glancing towards the door, he motioned for the others to come over. The group did as asked and walked over. There was 12 in total, 8 males and 4 females. 4 of the males were dressed as a samurai and the other 8 in shinobi garb. "This is Ami Takeda." Nanjiru pointed towards a light brown-haired girl with green eyes, who smiled at Naruto when her name was mentioned. She looked to be in her mid-20s. "Hello, Naruto Oji-sama," she greeted cheerfully, waving towards the blonde boy with a wide grin. "It's nice to meet you, by the way." Naruto blinked and returned the smile. "Hello, and I'm pleased to meet you as well," he returned. Nanjiru grinned at Naruto and pointed towards a boy 10 years Naruto's senior with shoulder-length black hair and dark green eyes who held a small smile on his lips. "His name is Kajamaru Amari. He's going to help explain something to you later that you'll need to know." Despite looking confused, Naruto nodded his head. "It's nice to meet you, Kajamaru," he greeted with a small, polite smile. "And I'm happy to meet you as well, Naruto Oji-sama. It is my honor to be the one to help you through your ordeal," he replied. Nanjiru pointed to the next person, another female. Light pink hair with blonde tips and light blue eyes, she seemed to be a few years older than Ami. "Her name is Sakuya Hamada." "Pleasure to meet you, Naruto Oji-sama." She bowed her head and smiled calmly at the blonde, who nodded and returned the greeting. 2 boys who looked similar with orange hair and red eyes bounced towards Naruto with wide beaming grins plastered on their face. "Hello, Oji-sama," one started while the other continued. "We are happy to meet you, and we are quite pleased that Nanji-chan asked us to help him with taking care of you." Naruto just stared at them in curiosity. He had never met people quite like these two. They looked a few years older than Kajamaru, maybe nearing their 20s if he had to guess. Perhaps the same age as Kakashi or Irika. "Hi," he whispered. "I'm Kyosuke," the spiky-haired boy stated. "Kyosuke Sagawa." "And I'm Yusuke Sagawa," the unruly-haired boy exclaimed. A female a few years older than the 2 boys with the same orange hair and red eyes walked towards the 2 and smacked them both over their heads. "Shut up, you bozos." She glared at the 2 before facing Naruto with a smile. "Ignore my brothers, Oji-sama. My name is Orihime Sagawa, and I am happy to meet you." Naruto smiled and nodded his head as the last girl walked over and introduced herself as Misa Aikawa. She appeared to be the same age as Ami with elbow-length strawberry blonde hair and green eyes. A dark blue-haired male who looked to be the age as the twins bowed his head. "I'm Daisuke Komoda, and it is my pleasure to serve you, Oji-sama." Naruto nodded his head. "I'm pleased to meet you, Daisuke," the blonde whispered before turning towards the last 4 and his uncle, curious to know who they were and why they were dressed differently. Nanjiru nodded his head. "The ones who just introduced themselves to you are Uzumaki shinobis." The older prince of Yuzuno Kuni grinned at his nephew. "But these 4 over here are Uzumaki samurai. They will also be here to ensure your safety." Glancing at the 4 he told them to introduce yourselves. The 4 samurais stepped forward and got down one knee, bowing their heads in respect for the youngest prince of Uzumaki and their future king. Each of the samurai's hair and face were covered by a hood and a mask concealing them from view, and the only way you could identify who you were speaking to was by the color of their sash. "Byakuya Masamoto," a quite nearly emotionless voice stated. Glancing at the color of the sash, Naruto made a note that Byakuya wore a black sash. The man wearing the dark blue sash was the next to introduce himself, Shirataka Takahashi. The next to speak had a dark red sash with black at the ends, Kiya Urahara, and the last one, wearing a dark green-colored sash, Koga Moritaka. Kushina grinned. "Those 4 girls were friends of mine growing up. It's nice to see they stayed the same even after all these years." Turning, she ruffled Naruto's blonde hair. "We were Uzumaki worst troublemakers when I wasn't forced to be the princess." She grinned when Minato sighed. "It was them, my elder sister Anissa and myself. We were Whirlpool's hellions and we loved every second of it." Your uncle Nanjira told me stories about his two older sisters and their friends when I came to visit Yuzu no Kuni once. Minato glanced at his mirror image with a smile. If you asked, I'm sure he'd tell you all sorts of stories about your mom and her sister. Naruto glanced at his parents briefly before turning towards his uncle. Nanji-chan, can you tell me about my mom later? And will I be able to see their faces? The blonde motioned towards the samurai. Nanjira grinned at his nephew and nodded his head. I can tell you a lot of stories about your mother and even some about your Aunt Anissa. They were several years apart, but they were still the best of friends. They got into a lot of trouble and oftentimes they blamed me. Laughter rang out, causing Itachi and Naruto to glance towards Kushina, who was giggling. Good times, she whispered, beaming at Naruto. And as for you seeing the faces of the samurai, he glanced at the four and shrugged. You can see them later, if you want. Naruto nodded his head. Okay, he responded. Sarutobi smiled at the small blonde and cleared his throat. But before he could say anything, the door to his office opened, revealing Kakashi and Shursui. Everyone is waiting in the meeting room, Sandaime-sama. Alright, the Hokage stood up with a grin. He couldn't wait to see the look on the council's face when they realized just who they were abusing and what will come of them if they continue. Let's get this over with. Nanjira nodded his head while the Uzunin stood on his left. Naruto with Itachi beside him stood on the right with the samurais around both princes of Uzumaki, Kushina and Minato. Though they went unnoticed by everyone except two, stood behind Naruto and Itachi. Sarutobi led the group with Kakashi, Iruka and Shursui on either side of him. Kushina grinned and held onto Minato's hand tightly. I can't wait to see the look on their faces when they hear just who Naruto is, and what they could have done had my father been an unforgiving person. Minato could do nothing but nod. If he was honest with himself, he would admit to taking sadistic pleasure in what was about to happen. After everything those fools had done to his baby. It's showtime. Nanjira smirked. Entering the council room, the civilians and the elders immediately began yelling and asking for the reason they were here, not caring or paying attention to the people behind the Sandaime. Well, not caring until someone spotted a head of blonde standing beside a handsome redhead. What is that monster doing here? One screeched out, causing everyone to turn and look towards the blonde boy as well, and scowls and outraged yells were issued. But everything went silent when the samurai and the shinobis bearing Uzumaki mark stepped forward, blocking Naruto from view while brandishing their weapons, threatening. Nanjira glared at those who spoke out against his nephew. Fools! If anyone so much as looks at my nephew the wrong way, they won't live long enough to regret it. We were asked to come here by the Sandaime, who was tired of idiots like you who can't tell the difference from the container from the contained. Yelling once again broke out amongst the civilian side, while the clan heads remained silent and watched the Uzumaki nines. Quiet! Roared the Sandaime as he glared at the civilians heatedly. Naruto is here because this meeting concerns him. Walking towards his seat, Sarutobi motioned for the group to sit down. Nanjira walked towards the available seat and sat, pulling Naruto onto his lap while the Yuzu shinobis/samurais stood behind their princes, hands poised to draw their weapons should they be needed. So let's get started. Turning serious eyes towards the council, he narrowed his eyes. Let me introduce to you Prince Nanjira Uzumaki of Uzumaki. He's the younger brother to Princess Kushina Uzumaki, wife of Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, and the uncle to young Prince Naruto Uzumaki, he stated. And for those of you who can't make the connections, here it is. Uzumaki Naruto is the son of Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato. His birth name is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, prince and heir of Uzumaki and the Namikaze clan. It was silent for a second before everyone was on their feet. Yells and screams of outrage were voiced, quite loudly at that. Nanjira grew a tick mark as these so-called adult screams pierced his brain, painfully, causing it to throb. Shut the fuck up, you pieces of filth, raged Nanjira as he stood up while gently setting his nephew on the chair. Your yelling won't change the fact that Naruto is indeed my nephew and the son of your most beloved hero. And yes, he is the heir of Uzumaki. A lot of the civilians got those looks on their faces. You know, the greedy looks, glittering eyes and all. A woman with long pink hair and green eyes opened her mouth to speak but promptly closed it again when narrowed eyes glared at her, a scowl marring his face. I know what you were about to suggest, and don't you even dare utter those words, Nanjira glared, while the clan heads and the Sandaime tried to conceal their grins. It was about time the civilians were shown their place within the shinobi village. For too long were these people demanding things from them and sticking their noses in matters that didn't concern them. Hissing, the pink-haired woman stood up, slamming her palm onto the table. He's the last of his clan, so he should be put into the CRA by the laws of this village. We have several girls his age that would be perfect choices. The Uzushio shinobis and samurai stood at the ready, hands on their katana and frown on their faces. The clan head sneered at the woman for her behavior. A second ago the bitch was calling for the boy's death, and now she was pulling the CRA upon hearing of the blonde's heritage. Kushina's brow was twitching in rage. Itachi's lips thinned while Naruto was just staring at his mother in confusion, not understanding what was going on. Minato's smile was grim as he placed a calming hand on his wife's shoulder. Technically the boy wasn't the last of his clan, and hopefully Nanjiro would remember this fact. It would help cut the civilians off their rant. He could tell Itachi and have him relay the information. But everyone here already knew how close the boy was to the 4ANBU, and therefore they would think Itachi was lying in order to protect Naruto. Kakashi narrowed his visible eye, wondering how his sensei and his wife was taking what that woman said. Knowing Kushina though, she was most likely raging. Iruka looked about ready to yell or pull a Kushina on the council, and the only thing stopping him was Kakashi's hand on his. Shirosue did nothing to hide his glare and wanted nothing more than to lash out at the woman. She was the main one who formed mobs to initiate a fox hunt. The last of his clan? I think not. The Uzumaki clan makes up more than half of Uzushiogakure, and I know for a fact that Minato had 2 older siblings who are in Suna, last I heard. The female is married with 3 children. Nanjiro smirked. You can't enact the CRA for the reason you stated, seeing as Naruto isn't the last of either clan, and even if Naruto wasn't the last of the Namikes, and would be forced into the CRA, none of the girls would ever bear the Uzumaki name, and his kids wouldn't be able to succeed the throne afterwards, seeing as they would carry the Namikaze name, and not the Uzumaki title. Minato smiled, relieved that Nanjiro had actually remembered that he did in fact have older siblings. The last time he had actually seen them was about 3 years before the Kyuubi attacked. His son's birth and the death of his wife and himself. A solemn sigh escaped his lips, and he wondered how they were doing. Kushina broke into laughter at that. That's right, Nanjiro, give them hell. Show them why no one messes with an Uzumaki. She pumped her fist. And they'd better not force that CRA crap. Naruto will be with Itachi, and that's final. Itachi choked as he stared at the red-haired woman standing behind Naruto. He couldn't believe Kushina said something like that. Jiraiya, Shirosue and Kakashi was one thing, but Kushina was another story. He turned and looked over at Naruto, who was blinking at his mother's statement. What do you mean? Minato-sama actually had siblings? A random civilian questioned. Why didn't we ever know? And why are they in Suna of all places? Shouldn't they be here in Konoha? Sandaime sighed and puffed on his pipe. Actually, no. Minato-kun was a civilian of Sunagakure who left Kaze no Kuni at 6, where he came to Hai no Kuni and was brought to Konoha to attend the academy here. He kept his life hidden from everyone except myself, Jiraiya, his wife, and obviously her family. So our Yondaime was from Suna. I wonder why he came to Konoha. And about his siblings, do they know about his death and that he has a kid here? Sandaime shook his head. We kept Naruto's heritage a secret. No one knew who his parents were except for a select few, and they have all been sworn to secrecy. And the only reason you know now is because I had to tell you that Naruto's uncle is taking him in and raising him, and should you be foolish enough to attack him, it's your own funeral, and I won't be doing anything to the Uzushio members should they attack any Konoha civilians or shinobi alike in defense of Naruto's safety. You can't do that, Sarutobi. Why are you protecting a demon instead of the normal humans? Besides, that demon brat doesn't need any protection because he's a monster. A growl was heard and Kushina lunged at the pink-haired woman and punched her, only to stomp her feet in anger when her fist went through the pink-haired thing. Bitch, I wish I had a body to hit you with. Blue eyes narrowed as she stared at the woman in front of her before her eyes widened in shock. Saya Haruno, I should have known it was you. You were always a bitch. Kushina scowled. My only regret, aside from not being able to live to raise Naruto, is not killing you when I had the chance. Naruto blinked at his mother before turning towards Minato, who smiled at him, placing a hand on his head. Don't mind your mother, Naruto. She doesn't like that woman is all. They never got along, he stated. Come with me, Naruto. The Yondaime motioned for the boy to follow him. The only one who saw him was Itachi, who raised an eyebrow, wondering what Minato was going to have Naruto do. As they left the room, he glanced at Kakashi, Iruka and Shirosue, who rose a brow at him. Minato wanted Naruto to follow him. I don't know what he's going to have him do. Though curious, the four didn't want to draw attention to themselves, so they turned their attention back towards the conversation. Oh, so we're back to calling Naruto a demon, are we? Nanjira smirked. And you wonder why I wouldn't allow that CRA to be enacted on Naruto, and for added purpose. There will be no arranged marriages because Naruto will marry out of love and nothing less, as is the way of the Uzumakis. And trust me, you can't sneak around and try to attain any Uzumaki sperm in hopes of impregnating your daughter, wife, or another female in hopes of stealing Naruto's birthright, because the Uzumaki Kiki Genkai can only be passed down naturally, which means Naruto has to bed the person in order for the bloodline to be passed down. The civilians seemed outraged by this, whilst some snickered and the others looked happy and relieved by that. They were only too aware of how greedy the civilian half of the council were when it came to bloodline user or upping their own prestige. It was around here that Naruto returned and took his seat, with no one knowing that the boy had been missing for at least half an hour, except for Kushina and the 4 ANBUs, who played it cool and decided to question the boy later. Kushina crossed her arms and walked back towards Naruto, having calmed down from her ranting, and smiled at her son. Hey Naruto, can you do mommy a favor? The red-haired princess of Yuzu no Kuni leaned down and whispered something into her son's ear, and he nodded his head, which gained everyone's attention. Itachi rose an eyebrow, wondering what Kushina was up to. He still had to find out what Minato had Naruto do. But now the Whirlpool Princess was up to something. With a concealed sigh, he turned his attention towards the older blonde, who wore a pensive look, and shrugged his shoulder when he saw the Uchiha heir's stare. I have no idea what she is saying, and you'll find out what I had Naruto do after the meeting. What's going on, Itachi? Shursui whispered, gaining Kakashi and Iruka's attention as the two looked at the only other person beside Naruto who could see Kushina and Minato. Itachi narrowed his eyes. I don't know. Kushina is currently telling Naruto to do her a favor. She is whispering it into his ears, so neither I nor Minato-sama knows what she's planning. But whatever it is, I hope it won't be too bad. And before you ask, Minato-sama will tell us what he had Naruto do later. Kakashi nodded his head. Sounds like sensei. Narrowing his eyes, he stared at the blonde boy. But Kushina, knowing her, whatever she is telling Naruto is going to be humiliating. And I bet I know who she's targeting. The single pair of dark eyes glanced at the sneering pink-haired woman. And I can't say I feel any amount of pity for that thing. Iruka smiled and nodded his head in agreement. Shursui grinned in apparent glee, while Itachi sighed lightly, but the slight twitching in the corner of his mouth told a different story. Naruto watched as his mother moved away and smiled. Go on, Sochi. Tell them what I said, all right? Kushina shot her son a wide beaming smile, while Minato narrowed his eyes, wondering what his wife was up to. Turning, the blonde boy stared at the council. If I'm a so-called monster, then you must be a gold-digging tramp who will spread her legs for anyone, whether they be man, animal, or even a tree. If I was ever forced into the CRA, or even into an arranged marriage, you can bet that I'd rather screw a dog than touch your filthy, skanky-ass daughter with a 10-inch stick, and if you are any indication of what your daughter will become, then I'd rather throw in my lot and bat for the home team. Naruto turned and glanced at his mother, whose smile had widened, and she nodded her head, encouraging him to continue. Because all you are is a loud-mouthed, screeching howler monkey who will even give banshees a bad name, so your daughter will be 100 times worse. The entire council was floored and gaping at the 5-year-old. Sarutobi and the others who knew about Kushina and Minato were twitching and cursing Kushina for telling Naruto to say such things. Minato frowned and stared at his wife. Kushiheim, why did you tell our son to say such things? He's only 5 years old. He shouldn't even know those types of words yet. The yondaime scolded the redhead. Nanjira blinked, while the rest of the Uzushio shinobi and samurai were left speechless by what the small boy had just said. Itachi walked over and kneeling in front of Naruto. I don't want you saying those things again. Alright, Naruto. I know your mother said it, but sometimes you shouldn't repeat what others tell you. Okay, Itachi, I promise I won't say those words again. Naruto glanced at his parents. Sorry, but I can't repeat any more bad words for you, mommy. I promise, Ida-kun. Kushina smiled. That's good, honey. And you shouldn't go back on your promises. The redhead patted the blonde boy's head. I love you, Naruto, she whispered. And I shouldn't have made you say those things for me. That's okay, mommy, he replied. It was around this time that the council broke out of their shock. Saya and the rest of the civilians started ranting, while the clan heads watched Naruto converse with thin air and confusion. Hayashi and Fugaku activated their Byakugan/Sharingan and peered in the direction Naruto was staring in. Shibi unleashed his bugs while Tsum and Kuramaru began sniffing the air. I can see 2 chakra presents and that's it. They're like a mass of chakra with no bodies, Hayashi spoke, while the other clan heads related that they couldn't detect anything out of the ordinary. Nanjiru and the Uzushio shinobi and samurai seemed intrigued and wondered if Kushina was really still here and speaking with her son. It could explain why and how the boy knew some language. Kushina always had such a colorful vocabulary. The civilians and the elders demanded for an explanation, while the shinobi portion of the council seemed curious about the going-on and by how unsurprised the third appeared to be. They could only speculate that the man already knew who or what the mass of chakra is or was. Sarutobi silenced the yelling once again and glanced at Itachi and Naruto before facing the council. Naruto and Itachi are very special. The both of them are able to see and communicate with beings thought to be dead, ghosts in other words. The two interacting with Naruto is none other than the boy's parents, and they aren't pleased by the treatment the villagers have given to him. Yondaime is here? Where? Shrieked a pink-haired woman, twisting her head whichever way, hoping she would be able to spot the handsome blonde man. Minato-kun, where are you? Bitch! You're just as annoying as I remember and still trying to steal my husband, aren't you? You pink-headed, flat-chested cow. If I could, I would love to slap that stupid right out of you. You fat-ass holler monkey. The red-hot-blooded habanero continued her insulted rants, forgetting that Naruto was within earshot and could hear everything she was saying. Naruto blinked at his mother and tilted his head to the side. Nanji-chan, Sarajiji, how can Ka-chan slap the stupid out of that flat-chested, pink-headed cow? The blonde questioned as he turned towards the two said men who blinked at what the boy just said. Definitely Kushi-chan. Some called, laughing. She is the only one who would say something like that to the banshee. Hayashi and Fugaku nodded their heads. Their wives having been best friends with Kushina, they had spent a lot of time with the rambunctious fiery-headed woman, and despite their usually stoic expression, their mouth fell open at the thought of their Yondaime and his wife being here. Especially Kushina and her crude vocabulary. She'll corrupt the poor kid. Shikaku, Shibi, Chuza and Inoichi, being friends with Minato, also knew how much the Whirlpool Princess hated fangirls, said they gave real kunoichis a bad name, and how much of an insult they were to female kind everywhere. And the thing that everyone feared was the redhead's temper, and it seemed she was really pissed now as she was saying such words in front of her impressionable son. Sarutobi-sama, maybe you should continue before everyone gets distracted by something that they have no business knowing. Itachi cut in as he placed a hand on the blonde boy's head, who was pouting since no one was answering his question. The Sandaime nodded his head in agreement. All right, back to the real reason we were brought here, Sarutobi called out. Naruto will not be used in the Clan Restoration Act for the sole purpose of him not being the last of either clans, and he won't be forced into an arranged marriage with anyone either, and Nanjiru, as his uncle, will have full guardianship of Naruto until he reaches Chunin status or 18 years of age. Nanjiru smirked at the disgruntled looks the civilian half of the council tossed him. What, you got a problem? It's not my fault you idiotic fools couldn't see past your own noses and treat my nephew like the hero he was born as. He saved your worthless asses by containing the 9 tails and he doesn't even get a thank you. Minato nodded his head. My regret of a lifetime would be trusting this village to respect the final words of their leader and hero, the blonde man whispered, running a hand through his hair. I'm just glad that after today he wouldn't be attacked by anyone. After an hour of the council yelling and argument, Nanjiru grew tired of it and stood up. I'm adopting Naruto and that is final. Should you deny me the right, I will bring down the raging wrath of Uzushio and his allies. Do not fuck with me, he hissed. You're lucky His Majesty hasn't declared war yet. Picking up his nephew, the two princes of Yuzu no Kuni left the room with Naruto's protectors and the Yuzu guards behind them. Sarutobi smirked and stood up, placing his hat over his head, the brim shadowing his face. Meeting is over and don't even think about doing anything. I have already notified the Fire Lord about Naruto's heritage, how he's been treated by the majority of the village, and him being adopted by his uncle. He's disgusted and shocked by the outright disregard you have for authority, and the last wishes of your leaders. He'll be making an appearance in 7 days to speak with the council, to meet with Naruto and his uncle. With that said, the elderly man left the office. The shinobi half of the council left with smiles for the first time in 5 years, while the civilian half were grumbling. Not that anyone cares. As they all left, one stayed seated as they stared out the window with a smirk. Just you wait, my little cherry blossom will make that demon fall in love with her, and when they get married, I'll be made queen like I was born to be and rule over Yuzushiogakure. Unaware to Saya, Kushina and Minato were still in the room and didn't like the sound of that. I knew that bitch was trouble. Kyubi should have done the world a favor and killed the whore that night. Minato nodded. Let's go and alert Itachi so he can alert Sarutobi-sama and the others to what she plans on doing. Nanjira blinked at Sarutobi in confusion. What are you talking about, Sarutobi? I don't recall anything about my sister being mentioned. The Yuzusho shinobis nodded their heads at that. Minato and Kushina appeared just then and glanced at Itachi asking him what was going on, and when the younger Uchiha told them that the third was about to explain about him and Kushina's appearance when Nanjiru intercepted and said he doesn't know why the third was bringing up the both of them. The Yondaime grinned. Tell Sarutobi that I had Naruto apply seals to the door when we left earlier, and that it was designed to wipe a specific memory from everyone's mind. In this case, it was to be knowledge of Kushina and I being apparitions. The only thing they'll remember is Naruto being adopted, his heritage, but nothing else that involves either Kushina and I. Itachi nodded and told the Sandaime what Minato said. Smart. Kakashi smiled. That way the civilians won't be going around telling everyone that Naruto and Itachi can see ghosts, and that the Yondaime is still here. Iruka nodded his head before he paused. Wait, did Yondaime-sama just say Naruto drew the seals? Itachi nodded his head. Yeah. Wouldn't that mean Naruto would be very good at sealing? Maybe someone should start teaching him Fuinjutsu, so he would more proficient in it by the time he's older, Iruka stated. Imagine the things he'd be able to do once he's older. Nanjira cleared his throat. Yes, we're still here and very much confused about what you're all talking about. The Prince of Whirlpool had a tick pulsing on his forehead. Explain to us what is going on. Naruto, despite being young, knew what was going on and tugged at his uncle's sleeve. Nanji-chan, Okasan said to calm down. Tomato Brain and the Hokage will tell you everything. Tomato Brain? Why that tomato head? How dare she call me? He froze while the rest of the shinobi and samurai from Whirlpool gaped both inwardly and outwardly as they directed shocked stares towards the small, blonde boy. Orihime knelt and stared at the small boy. Honey, what did you just call your uncle? She wanted to be sure they really heard what they think they did. Tomato Brain, Ka-chan said that would get Nanji-chan to stop yelling long enough so that Sandaime can talk. She said some other stuff but I couldn't hear. Then Tusan told me to not pay attention to Ka-chan anymore because she was a motor mouth. Then she got really quiet, smiled, and it seemed to scare Tusan because he ran away and she was chasing after him. Kakashi, Iruka, Shursui and the Sandaime turned towards Itachi, who nodded his head, silently telling them that what Naruto said really did happen. And they didn't know if they should laugh or shake their head. Okay, what's going on? Nanjira questioned. Sandaime smiled. As I was trying to tell you before, Nanjira-sama, your nephew and Itachi can somehow see the spirit of both your sister and the fourth Hokage. We found out earlier today, after spending a little more than an hour explaining everything to the Yuzu shinobis and the samurais revolving around Naruto, Itachi, their ability to see Minato and Kushina's spirits, and what took place during the meeting. Though confused, Nanjira shrugged and turned towards his nephew, who was staring with a glazed look on his face as he stared out the window, but not really seeing anything, walking towards the small boy. Nanjira smiled and tapped the boy's nose. Do you want to learn the Uzumaki fighting style? Naruto blinked and glanced towards his uncle and nodded his head. Sure, when do we start? Right now! Exclaimed the redhead as he grinned and picked the blonde up. Those who wants to watch better hurry and follow. Itachi, Kakashi, Iruka and Shursui were the first to chase after Nanjira while the others followed a few moments later. Sarutobi glanced from the stack of paperwork to the door and back before standing up. There was no way he would choose to do paperwork when he had an excuse to get away from the office. Reschedule all meetings and take a rain check for all visitors, important or otherwise. I'm going to be gone for the rest of the day. The receptionist nodded, a bit confused, and watched as the leader of Konoha waltzed out of the tower with a certain spring to his step. Must be happy to get away from the paperwork. The woman sighed and shook her head. Time skip. The years passed in a blur, and before they knew it, 7 years had gone by since the day Nanjiru and the others arrived. Today was the day the Genins would be graduating, and amongst those was one certain young man. Well, boy, really. Uzumaki Naruto had been the talk of the town for years now, ever since the village found out just who his parents were, and what his heritage implied. And all they wanted was to do was marry their child off to Naruto, so they could get a piece of his wealth. It was unfortunate, for them that is, that everyone who truly cared for the blonde denied every and all advances, the Uchiha clan being more venomous in their defense. All of them felt Itachi and Naruto would get together. It was written in the stars, or something like that. Naruto-kun, a voice called out, strong and stern, you better get a move on, or you're going to miss your genin exam and be forced to take another year of academy. A blur of yellow rushed past. I'm going now. I'll see you when the exams are over, Ida-chan, a feminine voice retorted. And I'll tell Sasuke team, you wish him well. The figure shook his head, a sigh escaping thin lips. HN, what am I going to do with that kid? Love him, another voice chimed in, and protect him, cherish him forever and ever. A giggle was heard, which prompted another sigh from the Uchiha heir. Naruto ran into the class and took his seat beside his best friend, who rose an eyebrow. Bilb. Don't call me that, team. The blonde's brow twitched in irritation. I'm tied for first with you, so how the hell am I considered the dead last? Sasuke rolled his eyes, a smirk curling his lips. The name suits you well, Uzumaki. Naruto growled angrily, but before he could reply, the door was slammed open to reveal two girls, one with pink hair and the other blonde. I was first! Both girls cried out in unison, causing all the males in the class to roll their eyes in exasperation. It was the same thing every day. What do you mean you were first? I was first. I get to sit beside Sasuke-kun. Facing each other, the two girls growled. But before they could start insulting each other, a girl from the front stood up. If anyone gets to sit beside Sasuke-kun, it should be me. After all, I was here first. After those words were spoken, all the Uchiha Sasuke fangirls in the class were on their feet yelling about how they should be the one to sit beside the Uchiha. Shikamaru sighed. Every day they do the same thing. When are they going to learn that the seat beside Sasuke is always taken, has always been taken, by the same person since the first day of school? Troublesome girls. Naruto grinned. I'm glad I don't have any fangirls. Yeah, that's because you're too pretty to have any girls, you have fanboys instead. Sasuke snorted, and as if to prove his point, a boy with light brown hair and green eyes approached. And here comes contestant number 1, the second-born son of the Uchiha head whispered, turning his head away. Naruto turned when he felt a tap on his shoulder. Oh, hello Murasaki-san. The blonde forced a smile. The boy might have been nice and sweet, always showering Naruto with compliments, but he was no Itachi. Knowing Sasuke was no help, the blonde glanced to his other friend who was sitting at the table on the other side of the room, blue eyes pleading. Good morning, Naruto. I was wondering if it would be alright if I sat. Whatever the boy was going to say was cut off by the arrival of Nara Shikamaru. Sorry, Toshio, but I'm taking this seat, alright? There was something I had to ask Naruto anyways. The lazy genius took the seat. My troublesome parents said it would be alright to go to your house later, and if I end up spending the night, I have to call home. Naruto, taking the hint, nodded his head, turning towards the brown-haired boy with a smile. Sorry, Murasaki-san, perhaps another time. The brown-haired boy nodded his head, shooting a small glare towards Shikamaru before he walked away with a huff. As soon as he left, the yells from the female who's in love with Sasuke were heard. Shikamaru no Baka, move your butt away from Sasuke-kun and Naruto, screeched a couple of girls, though they were all fans of Sasuke. Though they really didn't like the blonde because he was a lot prettier than them, they were told by their parents to make nice with them, so like every kid, they listened. Shikamaru sighed and grumbled under his breath about girls being loud and annoying and troublesome, and was about to retort to their statement when Naruto turned and flashed a smile. If you don't mind, Shika and I have something to talk about, so he has to stay here, alright? Grumbling, the girls left knowing they wouldn't be getting their way. A sneer formed on Sakura's lips as she glared at Naruto. But before she could say anything, Iruka entered, telling everyone to get to their seats. Now, as all of you know, today is the Genin exams. The class erupted into cheers at that until Iruka silenced them. The exam is taken in 3 parts, written, taijutsu, and the 3 academy ninjutsu that you've been taught. There will also be an extra credit portion which I'll tell you at the end of the exam, after the students were given their written test. Iruka told them they could start. Glancing at his paper, Naruto wrinkled his nose and narrowed his eyes at the smug-looking Mizuki. The smirk on his face was a major clue that he was the one who switched his test. Bastard, he thought, a grin curling his lips. Too bad for you though. I know these answers. 90 minutes later, Iruka told everyone to put their pencil down and turn the test over as he went around the room and gathered all the test papers. I'm going to shuffle these papers and hand them back out. And every paper you've got, that's whose test you're grading. Naruto furrowed his brows. That was new. Why? Mizuki thought it would be a good idea and a perfect learning experience for those who wish to become academy instructors. You have to know how to grade test papers, right? The blonde frowned and glared at Mizuki. He knew that damn bastard had done that purposely, so that the class will know how stupid he is when he got all the questions wrong. Irika-sensei, I need to tell you something. Can you come up here? Raising a curious brow, the brown-haired Chunin headed towards his favorite student's table. Yes, what is it, Naruto? Naruto shot a glare towards Mizuki, who wore a frown. My test was different from the others. Mizuki had them switched. I need you to grade mine. The blonde replied, causing both Shikamaru and Sasuke to frown and Irika to shoot a discreet glare towards his assistant. I understand, Naruto. Don't worry. Irika grabbed the blonde's test and placed it on the bottom. Since you won't have a test to check over, you can remain here, or wait for us at the training grounds. Naruto nodded his head. I'll head towards the training grounds. The blonde stood up, flicking stray pieces of hair off his shoulder and straightening out his outfit as he made his way towards the door, unaware of the stares that were aimed at his back. The Sandaime sighed as he glanced towards the person hiding in the shadow. Itachi-san, why don't you keep Naruto-kun company while he waits for the rest of his class to join him in the training ground? The chrome-masked Anbu materialized before his leader. A noticeable eyebrow would have been raised if it wasn't for the porcelain mask concealing his face. What do you mean, Sarutobi-sama? Mizuki switched Naruto's test with a harder one, and then had Irika suggest the class grade each other's one. Said it would be a great learning experience. But I guess he just wanted to try and embarrass Naruto in front of the class, Naruto told Irika. And of course Irika said he'd grade Naruto's test himself, and that Naruto could wait at the training grounds for them. Itachi growled and clenched his fist. Alright, I'll return as soon as Naruto's class are with him. With a nod from his leader, Itachi vanished from the room. Minato and Kushina sat beside their son, the latter hissing profanities when she found out the reason he was sitting inside the academy training ground, by himself. They arrived a few minutes ago, wanting to see how far Naruto came in his training, only to blink in shock when the only person there was their son. When Minato asked where the rest of the class was, let's just say the answer wasn't pleasing. Then Itachi appeared in a cloud of smoke. I heard what happened, that bastard. The Uchiha heir took the seat beside the younger blonde, who grinned up at him. At least I knew all the answers on that test. Itachi nodded, removing his mask as he stared at the younger boy beside him. What test did he give you? Naruto shrugged, not sure, but it looks like the test that Ibiki and Anko were writing up. The Chunin exam. Itachi's brow twitched. That bastard stole a test that Ibiki was going to use for this year's Chunin exam. Naruto blinked in surprise. He didn't know it was the exam used for Chunins. He thought that perhaps it was an advanced test used for Genins instead of academy students. So I just did a Chunin test. But it was too easy to actually be used for Chunins, the blonde denied. Minato chuckled and ruffled his son's hair. I saw that test, and Genins taking the Chunin exam will be hard-pressed to answer those questions. You're just smarter than the average person. Naruto giggled at that, shaking his head a bit. You have to say that because you're my father. Blue eyes glowed beneath the light of the sun, causing a soundless gasp to escape from Itachi's throat. Kushina glanced at her future son-in-law and grinned at his look. Beautiful, isn't he? The redhead giggled as she brushed her long hair over her shoulder. Breathtaking. Itachi corrected in a whisper so only she could hear, which caused Kushina to smile brightly in approval. Light blue eyes glanced towards the father and son pair, and her smile softened a bit. The both of them really did make a striking pair. Bright hair, bright eyes, and equally bright personality. They were perfect, and they were hers. Naruto reached over and run his fingers through the red hair. Are you okay, Oka-san? He whispered, eyes held worry as they stared at her. You look as if you were going to start crying. Kushina wrapped her arms around her son. I'm fine. I was just thinking how lucky I am to have such a perfect family, a handsome husband, a lovely son, and a great son-in-law. A smile was flashed towards Itachi, causing the said boy and Naruto to blush, while Minato chuckled and shook his head. You left someone out, Oka-san, Naruto replied, a smile forming on his lips at the confused look she gave him as he leaned into her embrace. I have a beautiful and very caring mother. Kushina's eyes shone with tears. I love you, Naruto. Naruto smiled. And I love you as well, Oka-san. Voices, loud and grating, wafted to their ears, and the group turned to the direction it was coming from. It appears Naruto's class has just arrived, Itachi called, strapping his mask back over his face. I have to return to the office. Naruto nodded. I'll see you after the academy is over then. When Itachi nodded his head, the blonde smiled and waved just as the class came into view. Itachi smiled behind the mask and disappeared from view in a cloud of smoke. Who was that? Iruka questioned, frowning, glancing at the spot the unknown person was just standing moments ago. Naruto? The blonde shook his head. ANBU codename Crow. He was passing through and decided to keep me company until you came. Iruka nodded his head. Alright, we'll have the taijutsu portion of the test now. The names will be randomly chosen, so let's get started. Sasuke, Shikamaru and several others made their way towards Naruto as they waited for their names to be called. So Itachi was here? Sasuke whispered, watching as the blonde smiled and nodded his head, hand brushing his hair off his shoulder. Black eyes glanced towards the ghostly figure standing behind his best friend and gave a slight nod of his head in their direction. Kushina smiled just as bright as her son and waved while Minato just inclined his head in greeting. I see. Naruto glanced in the direction Sasuke had glanced in and smiled. Yeah, they wanted to be here. Throughout the years few could naturally see Minato and Kushina. The ones who could were the Hyuga clan with their Byakugan and their ability to see chakra, and those who learned to see the two were the Uzushio shinobi/samurais, Iruka, Kakashi, Shisui, and most of Naruto's close friends who found out about his ghostly parents and wanted to meet them. Alright, the first up is Haruno Sakura, and Iruka paused as he drew another piece of paper from the small box in his hand. Uzumaki Naruto. The Chunin glanced towards the blonde and smiled. I'm placing a handicap on you, alright? Naruto gave a nod of his head. Okay, what are my limitations? None of your bloodline techniques. Giving a nod and understanding, the blonde stood in a casual pose, arms crossed over his chest, and just to annoy the pinkette, he made a show of yawning in hopes of riling up the kunoichi, and succeeded when Sakura started fuming. You may begin, Iruka called out, and the green-eyed girl wasting no time in charging forward, ready to pound the blonde, for his blatant disrespect, with a cry of anger. Naruto smirked as the girl neared and raised his hand, curling his pointer against the pad of his thumb. The blonde flicked the girl's forehead, sending her flying backwards to hit a tree. Oops, too much. And I was holding back too. Ino broke down into hysterics. Hee. Sakura must have thought she had the advancement when Iruka said you couldn't use your bloodline or any of your other techniques that go along with it. The female blonde grinned. He should have limited you to only using the academy techniques. Yes, but logically Naruto would have still won. Why, you ask? Because he is a lot stronger than Sakura, Shino replied, adjusting his shades. Ino furrowed her brows. Don't you ever talk normally? No, why, you ask? Because normal is vastly overrated. Naruto giggled as he walked towards his group of friends after being dismissed by Iruka. He does have a point. Besides, none of us can be categorized as normal. Ino-chan, leaning closer, the blonde glanced towards his cheering mother and grinning father, with a small smile. For one, we can see the spirits of my parents. The group could do nothing but agree with that. By the end of class, no one was really surprised when Shikamaru, Shino, Chuji Ino, Kiba plus Akamaru, Hinata and Sasuke won their matches. Turning, Iruka told the class they were moving on to the 3 academy ninjutsu along with the other jutsu that they knew for extra credit. Alright, let's start reverse alphabetical order. So Yamanaka Ino, we'll begin with you and work our way up. Ino nodded and stepped forward, and as expected, she executed the 3 academy ninjutsu. For the extra credit jutsu she showed off her clan mind transfer. Naruto followed suit, and just like his female friend he performed excellently, as did the rest of the class except for those unimportant filler characters that no one really cares about. The only difference was the extra jutsu that they used. With Naruto, he used the jutsu he inherited from his mother. Chakra chains erupted from his body and wrapped around the tree in front of them. Sasuke fired off a fireball. Shikamaru used his shadow to Posse's Mizuki and made him slam his head against the tree. It was revenge for his treatment against Naruto. Kiba and Akamaru used his clan combination clone. Hinata used her clan's 64 palms against Mizuki. Sakura didn't do anything because she didn't know anything beside what the academy had to offer. Chuji used his body expansion and Shino used a bug clone. Iruka nodded his head. With a smile, good. Let's go back to the class and I'll announce who passes and hand out your Idi. The class began chattering as they walked back to the academy and their classroom. Upon reaching the said room, the students entered and took their assigned seats. Okay, let me see. Irika paused and glanced at his paper. Those who pass are Akimichi Tsuji, Kara, Toshio, Hyuga Hinata, Ami, Inazuka Kiba, Kyoya, Sage, Haruno Sakura, Nara Shikamaru, Faye, Aburaim Shino and Mai. The brunette glanced up and smiled. The kunoichi of the year is Yamanaka Ino, and the rookie of the year would have been a tie between Uchiha Sasuke and his best friend, Uzumaki Naruto. But because of his paper test, if I may, Irika-sensei? Naruto rose his hand, interrupting the brunette before he could continue, and after getting the nod, he continued, well, I want to share the Rookie of the Year spot with Sasuke. I mean, you said it yourself right, it would have been a tie. The blonde smiled. I don't think it's fair to punish Sasuke because we have such an incompetent teacher assistant. Naruto glanced towards Mizuki, making it obvious who he was speaking about. Besides, it doesn't really matter who's rookie or not. The enemies surely wouldn't care about your status in your class when they're about to kill you. At that, several gasps were heard, mostly from the civilian half, while the ninja clan kids nodded their heads in agreement to what Naruto just said, causing Irika to smile and nod his head. So for the first time, ever, I present to you, your class Rookies of the Year. Naruto slung a hand over his best friend's shoulder with a giggle, which Sasuke responded by wrapping his arms around the blonde's waist. As they walked towards the front of the class to accept their headbands, Sasuke smiled and tightened his hold on Naruto. Ino cheered loudly and enveloped both boys. We are awesome! She declared with a laugh. I can't wait to tell my father I was the top kunoichi of my class. I bet he'll be proud. Naruto nodded his head and smiled while the rest of their friends came over and congratulated them. Irika smiled at his class. Okay, you guys are dismissed, go on. The class quickly vacated the room, looking forward to the celebration that was sure to come.